Hi guys, it's Amy and welcome to the channel, or welcome back. I hope that you're doing well. Let me know how you're doing in the comments. Today we are talking about my most anticipated releases for 2025. And I know we are already kind of into January. I can't believe we're already like mid-month. So I do have some that have already been released, but you may not be aware of them, so I do want to touch on them, and I even have one of them in my hand right now. If you're curious, this hat is from Book of the Month. It says book person on it. I was having a bad hair day, so I thought it would look cute to wear today. But the book that I have in my hand is actually also from Book of the Month. They are not sponsoring this. I just happened to want to try it. It was like $5 for starting a subscription with them. So this is my first time using them. So I am kind of just checking it out and seeing how I feel about it. But I thought this hat was super cute. But I am excited about this list. We've got pretty much fantasy and romantasy. There are some kind of little deviations throughout the list. There is like kind of horror, suspense, some thriller, but most of them have some kind of magic or fantasy element to them. So if that doesn't interest you, I don't know if this list would be for you, but that is primarily what I talk about here on my channel. So we're going to get into some anticipated fantasy books. All right, the first on my list is from an author that I really enjoy, and that is Adrienne Young's A Sea of Unspoken Things. And again, this is from Book of the Month. You can see their logo here at the top. But this came out January 7th, so it's been out for a little while. And I saw that this was offered through Book of the Month. They tend to do like new releases, and so you can kind of, it's essentially almost like pre-ordering something, but I ordered this before the book even came out. So I was excited to be able to get my copy of it, and it's a really nice hardback. So this plus the hat for $5, I think is a really good deal. This is about a woman who investigates her brother's mysterious death while coming to terms with her own haunting past. And this is kind of giving me the vibes of her book, The Unmaking of June Farrow. This is kind of like a magic realism sort of book with kind of a mystery element to it. So I'm really curious to see where this is going to go. I've got a couple more that came out January 7th, and the next one is A Language of Dragons by S.F. Williamson. This is a YA historical fantasy about a young woman who wants to study about dragon languages, and it has like dark academia vibes and an enemies to lovers romance. This sounded really interesting to me, and I've seen a few people talk about it. I think the cover is absolutely gorgeous. And of course, anything with dragons, I am there for. Next up is one that I'm really surprised I haven't seen more people talk about, and that is Breath of the Dragon by Shannon Lee and Fonda Lee. This came out also on January 7th. And you might be familiar with Fonda Lee with her Greenbone Saga trilogy, like Jade City, that trilogy. But this is a duo, and it is with Shannon Lee, and she is Bruce Lee, yes, that famous Bruce Lee's daughter. And this was such an interesting duo to come together and write a book, but apparently she is bringing to the table some martial arts expertise. So I'm really curious to see how that maybe will play into the book. But this is the first book of a YA fantasy duology. It's about a 16-year-old boy who wants to compete in a tournament to prove his worth as a warrior. And this just sounded really good. I love the cover. And of course, again, dragons, I am always there for. The next book came out January 14th, and that is Watermoon by Samantha Soto Yambao. And this is supposed to be a cozy fantasy that I think has some sci-fi elements to it. But this is about a woman who owns a pawn shop where you can sell your regrets, which sounds very interesting. And she goes on this like magical journey with a charming physicist. So it sounds very entertaining, very cute. I love a cozy fantasy, and I have heard nothing but good reviews about this. As I'm filming this, I am like a couple days away from the very popular Onyx Storm that came out, the third book of the Fourth Wing series. I am not particularly drawn to that series, so I am going to move into the month of February and look at my list. And the next book is from an author that I really enjoy, and that is TJ Klune's The Bones Beneath My Skin, and it comes out February 4th. This is supposed to be a paranormal thriller, which is not my typical genre, but I am always willing to try TJ Klune's work. This is about a 10-year-old girl with an impossible power and her father and a stranger who have to come together in order to help save her from these dangerous forces that are wanting to get her. And it's supposed to be for fans of Stranger Things, which I really enjoy that show. So if that piques your interest, Stranger Things, this might be for you. And I'm very curious to try it out. But I also wanted to plug that I recently listened to an interview, a talk that TJ Klune did, and he partnered with, I believe it's called the Library Science Consortium, and he was doing basically an interview, a talk partnered with public libraries, and he was talking about his Cerulean Chronicles series. It's now being called that. Basically, The House in the Cerulean Sea and the sequel, Somewhere Beyond the Sea. And it was so much fun listening to him and his process. But I think he said it was the first time he was mentioning this, that he is going to put out a third book for the Cerulean Chronicles. It doesn't have a title. He didn't say what it tentatively would be about or when it's going to come out. But if you like that series, look out for information on that. Okay, next up is one that I actually was not able to find on Goodreads. I don't actually remember where I saw this book, but the information can be found on Barnes & Noble's where you can tentatively buy it. It comes out February 8th, and that is The Timekeepers by Jill Archie. This is about a girl named Onyx, whose life in the Clockwork Lands, a world of colossal clock gears and precise schedules, is upended when an unexpected arrival leads her beyond her sheltered existence. She uncovers hidden secrets, and she begins to question the reality she once trusted. I think there is maybe some time travel in here. I'm not 100% sure, but this world of clocks and secrets really sounded intriguing to me. I believe it is an adult fantasy, but this just sounded like a lot of fun, so definitely looking forward to that. I do have some arcs on this list, and my first one is coming out February 11th, and that is the very anticipated Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales. I always love the creative titles that Heather Fawcett comes up with. And this, again, is the third installment of this cozy academia fantasy. You're basically following scholars who study fairies, if you're not familiar with the series. And there is a little bit of romance in there as well. But I do have an arc for this and plan to read and put this out before the book comes out on February 11th. So definitely be looking out for my review for that. But I am very excited to read this book. I absolutely love the Emily Wilde series. My next book is supposed to have like fairy tale inspiration, which I'm not always drawn to those kind of books, but I really liked the cover of this one. And yes, I'm judging the book by the cover, but it sounded really interesting, so I wanted to give it a try. It is Upon a Starlit Tide by Kel Woods. And again, that comes out February 18th. This is a dark and enchanting fairy tale inspired historical fantasy that combines elements of The Little Mermaid and Cinderella. And of course, I loved those movies when I was growing up as a 90s kid, but I think that this sounds really interesting, and it having like a dark twist to it, I'm really curious where the story is going to go. Now, this next one that comes out February 25th, I have been seeing quite a bit of buzz about in the cozy fantasy community, and that is Green Teeth by Molly O'Neill. Again, this is a cozy fantasy with fae, folklore, and found family, narrated by a charismatic lake dwelling monster. And if that doesn't pique your interest, it's said to be for fans of T. Kingfisher, and she writes some very unique and interesting books. So I am very intrigued by this description, and having potentially maybe an unreliable narrator sounds like a fun time. Now, this next one is highly, highly anticipated, and I need to read the sequel before it comes out, but this is the third installment of the Legendborn cycle, and that is Oathbound by Tracy Dion. This comes out March 4th. We're getting into the March books, and I read Legendborn towards the end of 2024. I had like DNF'd it previously and then picked it up again, and I really enjoyed it. It is like Arthurian tales kind of spun and put on its head, and we're following a young black girl who is in like a special program at the University of North Carolina. It's basically like an advanced program for teenagers to kind of like start collegiate classes early, basically. But she's pulled into this secret society, and it is such a fascinating and very compelling YA fantasy. So I am definitely looking forward to this third installment, but again, I need to read the sequel before this third book comes out. Okay, this next one I've seen a little bit of buzz about in the cozy fantasy community, and I do have an arc for it, so I'm excited to read this, and that is Homegrown Magic by Jamie Pacton, and that comes out March 13th. This is a queer, cozy romantasy with friends to lovers chemistry, found family and rival family drama, and cozy garden magic. All of that sounds so good. I am definitely looking forward to reading that. Anything that says cozy garden magic, I feel like is how can you resist that? That just sounds so much fun. Getting into something that sounds a little bit darker is The Bane Witch by Ava Morgan, and this comes out March 18th. This is said to be practical magic meets Gone Girl. And if you have read the book Gone Girl or seen the movie, you know that it is intense. It is definitely a thriller, so I'm very curious to see how this one is going to play out. But it is supposed to be about a woman who is a witch and a hunter, and she encounters the Bane Witches, who are women that ingest deadly plants and use their magic to rid the world of evil men. It sounds like a really interesting time. Definitely sounds like it has some hardcore feminist vibes. So if that piques your interest and you like something that has a little bit of a darker tone, I would maybe look out for this one on March 18th. All right, we're moving into the month of April, and this is a book that I am super excited to read and thankfully have an arc for, but that is the sequel to The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett, and that is A Drop of Corruption. This comes out April 1st, and if you're not familiar with these books, it is basically like Sherlock Holmes in a fantasy world. It's like this dark and brooding world. There's these Leviathan beasts. The magic in the world is kind of like sci-fi inspired. I am definitely looking forward to this, and I absolutely loved the first book, so definitely recommend reading The Tainted Cup if you haven't read it, and definitely look forward to A Drop of Corruption. An author that I really fell in love with in 2024 is Abby Jimenez. So yes, I have some contemporary romance on this list, and her new book, Say You'll Remember Me, is coming out April 1st. I am really excited for this book. I loved her book Just for the Summer. I'm currently reading Part of Your World by her right now, and I'm enjoying that as well. But I am definitely excited about this. And if you're a Taylor Swift fan, that title probably just triggered you. I don't know if it necessarily has anything to do with Taylor Swift, but this is supposed to be about Xavier and Samantha, who have an amazing first date, but they are separated by complications in Samantha's life. So this is supposed to be a second chance romance that's funny, but deeply emotional, just like Abby Jimenez's style. So I am very much looking forward to that. I apologize if you can hear like a buzzing, ringing sound. Our heater is on. It is very cold. I'm in Florida, North Florida, and we got this huge snowstorm recently. For us, it's a snowstorm. We got like 8 inches of snow, which is super rare for our area. So our heater is kicking on periodically. So I apologize if you can hear that. Getting back into some fantasy, this is The Gods Time Forgot by Kelsey Sheridan Gonzalez, and it comes out April 8th. This sounds really interesting. It is Irish mythology collides with gilded New Age New York. That sounds very unique and interesting. This is a debut novel, and it is supposed to be an enemies to lovers historical romantasy, said to be for fans of Outlander and A Fate Inked in Blood. I have not read either of those books, but I do love like a historical fantasy. So having some romance in there sounds interesting, but just like the setting and the sort of like period with the mythology, the Irish mythology, that sounds so interesting. I am definitely looking forward to this one. All right, another contemporary romance, one that is very much anticipated, is Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry, and that comes out April 22nd. I know Emily Henry fans are just chomping at the bit for this book to come out, and like I am so jealous of anyone that was able to get an arc of this, if there are arcs going out for this. But this is supposed to be about two writers who compete to tell the story of a larger than life woman who has secrets up her sleeves. It was a little bit vague in the description, and I think maybe Emily Henry is just trying to keep things open-ended and our interest piqued. And I'm here for that. I'm okay with that. But basically, if it's Emily Henry, I definitely want to read it. I still have two books of hers I haven't read. I need to read Beach Read and People We Meet on Vacation. And obviously, those are more like summer books, but definitely looking forward to this one in April for the spring. Another arc that I have is a sequel to a book that I read last year and was fortunate to get an arc for that as well. This is from the author Taran Matharu, and this is The Tainted Con, which is the sequel in the Soulbound saga. The first book is Dragon Rider, and it is a really interesting book. It's kind of like Game of Thrones meets Aragon. There are definitely like inspirations from more popular fantasies. It was definitely like, it had some grit to it, with kind of the inspiration with like Game of Thrones and stuff. But this is about a dragon rider, obviously, from the title of the first book. But as alliances crumble and dark forces rise, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, our main character must confront their soul-bound tainted legacy while navigating political intrigue and deadly confrontations to prevent an ancient evil from consuming the realm. And that just kind of sounds like a good classic fantasy. And that's kind of how I felt with the first book. It was a solid fantasy. I feel like it would be really good for beginning kind of fantasy readers, for adult fantasy readers. So it definitely has adult themes from what I got from the first book, but I'm excited to continue this series and see where Matharu takes it. So I am not huge on Romantasy, but I surprisingly have a lot of Romantasy on this list. And I feel like at the end of 2024, coming into 2025, I've been trying to open myself up to trying new things. And I've found that some of the romantasies I've tried, I've enjoyed. So I was like, let's try some more out in 2025. And this next one comes out April 22nd, and that is When the Tides Held the Moon by Vanessa Vida Kelly. This is supposed to be a historical queer romantasy set in 1910s New York, which sounds so good. And this is about a metal worker who creates a water tank for a circus sideshow's merman. Yes, a merman. This sounds so unique, and anything with like a circus setting piques my interest for some reason. You can kind of go any which way with it, so I'm curious what the tone will be for this, but it sounds super intriguing. I love the time period that it's set in, and yeah, a circus in New York with a merman, like it's got all the things, all the good things. Okay, so I do have romantasy, but I also have fantasy romance. And yes, there is a distinction. Romantasy, it's like the romance is more emphasized. Fantasy romance, obviously the fantasy is more emphasized. The romance is kind of more of a subplot. So this fantasy romance is called The Floating World, and it comes out April 29th. And this is by the author Axie O, who wrote The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea, which I have not read, but I have heard very good things about. And this is a YA fantasy romance based on the Korean legend of the Celestial Maidens. I am not familiar with that, but it sounds very intriguing. And I feel like it's good to try things from different cultures, familiarize yourself with different mythology and history, because the world is a big place and we need to expand our minds about it. So this sounds like a really fun fantasy. This next book is one that I also have an arc for, and that is The Emily Adventures by Martha Wells. Yes, that is the author of the Murderbot Diaries, and this comes out May 13th. So we're getting into the May books. And this is kind of an interesting situation. It's basically two novels in one volume, and this is supposed to be a YA steampunk adventure. From the description, I couldn't quite get if maybe this is like a re-release of a previously written book, but it sounds really interesting. I really liked the cover of it, and steampunk definitely caught my attention, and I have really enjoyed Martha Wells' writing in Murderbot, so I'm really curious to see her take on a YA fantasy. Something that is really important for us to do is support independent authors. And this next guy is a book content creator who is definitely big on fantasy. And this book that he is putting out sounds so good. This is Evan Leakam's Angie Kills a King, and it comes out May 13th. This is his debut book, and it is supposed to be about an unlikely assassin who tries to escape a legendary bounty hunter. That sounds so intriguing. It sounds like it is going to be some high fantasy, epic fantasy, and I am definitely looking forward to it. Another author that I fell in love with last year is Frederick Bachman. I read his book Beartown, and it is an intense read, but it is so moving and absolutely worth the read. So once I read that, I was absolutely hooked, and I definitely want to read more of his books. But he has a new one coming out called My Friends, and it comes out May 20th. And this is supposed to be a funny but moving story about four teens whose friendship creates a bond so powerful it changes a stranger's life 25 years later. That sounds very interesting to me, and I'm curious how these four friends' stories are carried 25 years later to this stranger. So definitely intrigued, and I am very much looking forward to more of Bachman's writing. If you are a fan of the Shepherd King duology, One Dark Window, Two Twisted Crowns, the author Rachel Gillig is coming out with another book in 2025, and I know this is going to be highly anticipated. That is The Night and the Moth, and that comes out May 20th. This is supposed to be another gothic tale from her, and it's about a prophetess who is forced into an impossible quest to defeat the gods with a knight. So definitely seems like there's going to be maybe a romance in here, but I am really excited for it. I really enjoyed the Shepherd King duology. It was just a fun, fast-paced fantasy. It was kind of dark at the same time, but the magic was really interesting. Loved the characters and loved the romance. So definitely looking forward to this one. The next book actually came to me in an email from Goodreads. It was like one of their giveaways that you can enter, and the book just sounded really interesting to me, so I am definitely looking forward to this one. And it is Harmattan Season by the award-winning author Toche Onyebuchi. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And this comes out May 27th. This is a post-colonial West African fantasy, which sounds super interesting. Pretty much all of the like African inspired fantasies that I have read, I have really enjoyed. I love the mythology, and there's just so much variety within like African fantasies. So definitely looking forward to this one. It says, when a woman bleeding stumbles into the office of a veteran and private eye named Bubakar, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, he is reluctantly enmeshed in the secrets of a city on the brink of violence. This sounds a little bit intense, but it sounds like really intriguing, a mystery there. So definitely looking forward to this one. All right, getting into June. This is another arc that I have received, and this is Black Salt Queen by Samantha Bansell. This comes out June 3rd. This is supposed to be about a queen of a pre-colonial island nation that holds divine power, but her strength is failing and her trust in her line of succession is pretty small. So there are women of power, including the princess of this nation, who are basically fighting for the throne and they each hold a secret of weakness. The description sounded very interesting. It sounded very cutthroat, and it was very interesting that it's like all these basically noble women kind of like competing for the throne. So, very interested to see where that one goes. All right, this one is going to be highly anticipated. I've already seen people talking about it, and that is Bury Your Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. This comes out June 10th. And this is supposed to be a genre-defying novel, so I'm curious what genres it's all going to span. I know she always has some fantasy element in her books, but this is supposed to span 500 years, and it follows the intertwined lives of three sapphic vampires. I'm not the biggest vampire person when it comes to books and movies and all of that, but I'm a fan of V.E. Schwab, so I'm always willing to try, and spanning 500 years definitely sounds really interesting. This next book is supposed to be the first installment of a anticipated trilogy, and that is The Griffin King by Sarah Omer, and this comes out July 8th, so getting into the July books. And this is supposed to be a Southwest Asian inspired epic fantasy with morally ambiguous characters, ghouls and monsters, cutthroat Dionysic politics, expansive world building, and a slow burn romance. If that doesn't get you, I don't know what will. Okay, cozy fantasy lovers, this next one is highly anticipated, and that is the sequel to The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. It is A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping by Sangu Mandana. I know this book has been moved around multiple times, but we are finally with a set date, July 15th, and I'm really excited about this one. I really enjoyed the first book, and this is supposed to be about Sarah Swan, who loses most of her magic after resurrecting her great aunt and ends up managing an enchanted inn in Lancashire. Lancashire? I'm not sure how to say that. But while navigating eccentric guests, the Witches Guild's watchful eye, and a quest to restore her powers, Sarah teams up with Luke, a reserved magical historian, and discovers that the unconventional family she's built may be her greatest source of strength. And I loved the found family in the first book, so we're kind of just building off of that. So if you haven't read the first book, go and read that before this one. But definitely if you like cozy fantasy with some romance and found family, I definitely recommend looking out for this one. Another author that I really enjoyed in 2024 is Sylvia Moreno Garcia. And I really enjoyed her book, Certain Dark Things and Mexican Gothic. They are really out of my comfort zone. They kind of leaned more like horror with some fantasy, and they were just kind of darker in tone, but I enjoyed them. I had a fun time with them. So I am looking forward to her next book coming out July 15th, and that is The Bewitching. This is about three women in three different eras who encounter danger and witchcraft in this eerie generational horror saga. And I love anything with witches, and it's really interesting having like three different stories in three different time periods. So, really curious to see where that one's going to go. This next book, I have not read anything by this author, but I know that she is very beloved, and this is a highly anticipated book. I have seen people recently getting the ARCs for it. I think there were like 200 that were sent out. So if you got one, you are very special. But this is Catabasis by R.F. Kuang, and this is coming out August 28th. This sounds very interesting, kind of dark and mysterious. This is supposed to be Dante's Inferno meets Piranesi, if you're familiar with that book by Susanna Clarke. This is supposed to be a dark academia fantasy in which two grad students must put aside their rivalry and journey to hell to save their professor's soul. So it sounds pretty intense, but it sounds super interesting. So definitely looking forward to that. This next one I have not heard anyone talk about, and from what I got from Goodreads, I'm assuming this is YA, but I am not certain. But this is The Book of Heartbreak by Ova Sarin, and this comes out August 28th. This is supposed to be a gorgeous and funny romantasy of angels and curses, and it's supposed to be for fans of Leonie Taylor and Stephanie Garber. I really enjoyed the Once Upon a Broken Heart series by Stephanie Garber, so if it's kind of leaning in that vein, I think I'm going to enjoy this. But it's about a young woman who journeys to break her curse before her heart breaks forever. Definitely giving me kind of Once Upon a Broken Heart vibes, but very curious to see where it goes. So if you're a fan of either of those authors, definitely look out for that one. Okay, this next one is for the fan fiction girlies. I am not a fan fiction person, but I know that Manacled, what this book is kind of based on, is very, very beloved. And it is by Sin Lin Yu, the fan fiction writer. And her book Alchemized is coming out September 30th. If you're not familiar with the original book this is going to be based on, Manacled, it is a Hermione fan fiction, or Draco and Hermione from Harry Potter. So basically pairing them together, and it's like fantasy, romance. It's supposed to be really dark, intense, but an amazing story. I have not read it, but I have heard amazing things about it, so I'm really looking forward to reading Alchemized. But this is supposed to be about a woman missing her memories, and she fights to survive in a war-torn world of necromancy and alchemy, and the man tasked with unearthing the deepest secrets of her past. So I'm very curious to see this necromancy and alchemy kind of magic world, and very interested to see where the romance is going to go. You know you love an author when they make it twice on your anticipated list. And very recently, Adrienne Young announced her book Fallen City, a YA fantasy, and it is coming out November 4th. As we're getting further into 2025, there are less books that I have on this list. So it's kind of like as we get further into the year, I'm sure more things are going to be announced. But this book, Fallen City, is a YA fantasy based on Greek mythology in which a young man and woman are thrust into opposing sides of a rebellion in a walled city of Isara. As their lives intertwine through divine intervention and a shared quest to shift the city's balance of power, they face devastating secrets and a holy war that could irrevocably change their world. That sounds intense and really intriguing. I love the idea of Greek mythology in there, and I love Adrienne Young's writing, so very much looking forward to that one. Okay, another very anticipated book is Brigands and Bread Knives by Travis Baldree. This is the third installment in his Legends and Lattes series, and that comes out November 11th. And I absolutely love Legends and Lattes, and I loved Bookshops and Bone Dust, the prequel. And this is taking a character from the prequel and basically expanding on it. And this is following Fern, the Ratkin bookseller, who relocates to the city of Thune and sets up a shop next to a friend's coffee house. I wonder whose coffee house that is. If you read Legends and Lattes, you know that that is Viv's coffee shop. It says, however, after a night of heavy drinking, she awakens from far from home alongside a legendary warrior and an imprisoned chaos goblin. As they fend off various adversaries targeting the goblin, Fern embarks on a journey of self-discovery beyond her professional identity as a bookseller. This sounds like it's going to be a little more like action adventure than the first two books, which were much more cozy and very low stakes. So I'm really excited to see Travis Baldree kind of venture more into the action and adventure. So definitely looking forward to that. If you like cozy fantasy, if you love Legends and Lattes, definitely look out for that one. My next two, the last two on this list, are very highly anticipated by me and definitely anticipated by others, but these kind of are TBD, to be determined dates, unfortunately. So the first one is definitely coming out in 2025, that has been said on the interwebs, and that is The Strength of the Few, which is the sequel to The Will of the Many by James Islington. And I have seen different dates, heard different dates from different people, but I've seen tentatively in May, but according to Goodreads, it says in September of 2025. So I don't know. But basically, anticipating this sequel, I loved The Will of the Many. It was like my second favorite book out of the 119 books I read in 2024. So if that doesn't say anything, I don't know what does. So if you want epic fantasy, if you loved The Will of the Many, definitely look out for that one. And then the last one on my list, unfortunately, I've seen people crossing fingers and wishing that it comes out this year, and I'm along with them. But that is the sequel to Amina al-Sarafi by Shannon Chakraborty. I love Shannon Chakraborty, or her other nomenclature, S.A. Chakraborty. I love the Daevabad trilogy. I loved The Adventures of Amina al-Sarafi. And I'm going to be along with everybody else in the delusion and manifest this book. There's no title, but it is projected that it is going to come out. And I've been following Chakraborty online, her Instagram, and she'll talk about it every now and then. And she's like, I'm working on it. There's no projected date yet. So we're going to cross our fingers and we're going to hope that it comes out in 2025. No pressure. No pressure, Shannon, but we really want that book. Okay, guys, that is my most anticipated books for 2025. Definitely let me know if you are wanting to read any of these. And if you have some that aren't on this list, definitely let me know, because we always need more books, right? It's okay if we've got 900 plus books on our Goodreads. I was showing somebody my Goodreads the other day, and I forgot that there's literally like 900 books that I tentatively want to read. Do I think I'm going to read all of them? No, but they're ones that potentially I might read in the future. And they were like, wow, 900 books, that's crazy. And I was like, yeah, that is crazy. But we're going to keep adding to it. It's never going to stop. So let me know if you have any that weren't on this list. And I hope you guys enjoyed this list, going through it. And I will see you guys later. Bye.